My name's Jake, and honestly, this isn't the kind of thing I ever thought I'd talk about out loud, let alone share. But it's been a full year since I walked away, and the silence? It's louder than ever. Maybe writing it all out will help me understand how everything I trusted just slowly unraveled and then completely collapsed. Ashley and I were together for 8 years. Married for 6. To the outside world, we looked like one of those picture-perfect couples, vacations with friends, laughing at dinner parties, smiling like everything was good. But behind closed doors, things started changing. Not all at once. More like a slow tide pulling you out, inch by inch, until you realize you're too far from shore to swim back. It started with her phone. The way she always kept it face down. The odd little giggles she gave while texting, fake laughs that weren't meant for me. Then came the sudden string of work dinners she dressed a little too carefully for. The privacy. The emotional walls she kept building up while I kept trying to tear them down. I'll never forget one particular night. It was pouring outside, and she came home late again, claiming some meeting ran long. Her lipstick was smudged, but her story was flawless. I just stood there in the hallway, rain dripping from my coat, watching her like she was someone I'd never seen before. Someone who used to be my wife, but now felt like a stranger. I didn't yell. Didn't accuse. I didn't even ask. I just stared at her. And that was the moment I knew something fundamental had shifted. After that, I started sleeping on the couch. Told her it was for my back, but we both knew the truth. I stopped asking questions I didn't want to hear the answers to. But the signs kept coming. A second toothbrush in her gym bag. A man's cologne lingering on her scarf. Her laugh behind closed doors, fading into whispers the second I walked in. The truth didn't hit me like a punch. It crept in, quiet, cold, like a draft slipping under a door. And one morning, I just couldn't pretend anymore. I packed a bag, grabbed my passport, a few clothes, and that one old photo of my parents she never bothered to frame. I left my wedding ring on the nightstand. No note. No goodbye. Just silence. I walked out while she was still asleep. And I didn't look back. I didn't run across the country or start a new life. I just drove a few towns over and rented this tiny, weathered cabin near a quiet lake. Paid cash. No social media. No phone calls. I cut off everyone. Friends. Family. Co-workers. I just disappeared. Out there, surrounded by trees and stillness, I started to breathe again. Not out of peace, but out of necessity. There's something about realizing that the person you loved doesn't love you anymore, at least not in the way you thought, that breaks you wide open. But it also frees you. I'd spend hours on the deck, staring at the water like it might give me answers. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I just sat and let the wind move through me. I wasn't angry, though that surprises people when I tell them. I didn't leave because I was mad. I left because I was done pretending. There's a kind of pain that becomes a prison. And I was tired of living in it. Little memories would creep in, like when I'd catch myself reaching for 2 mugs instead of one when the kettle boiled. Or when I'd look out at a sunset and think, Ashley would love this, before reminding myself she probably already saw it. Just not with me. That cabin became my sanctuary. A place to unlearn everything I thought I knew about love and loyalty. And through it all, she never came looking. Not a text. Not a call. Nothing. The cabin I found was about as far from our old life as I could get without crossing a state line. It sat on the edge of a sleepy lake town where nobody asked questions, and no one cared about the guy who kept to himself. I paid everything in cash. Shopped once a week. Spent most days reading, walking, or just sitting out on the porch watching the water shift in the wind. There was peace in the silence. But also an emptiness that never really left. Like I'd hit pause on life and didn't know if I was ever going to press play again. People always assume I must have been furious when I left. That I stormed off in a rage. But the truth? I wasn't angry. I was just clear. There's something strangely sacred about reaching the moment when you finally realize the person you gave everything to doesn't see you anymore. It doesn't burn like fire. It chills. And in a way, that kind of cold honesty sets you free. I'd think about her sometimes. Not just the betrayal, but the early days too. The little moments that used to mean something. The way she'd curl up next to me on the couch, like I was the safest place in the world. The way she laughed at my stupid jokes. That look she gave me when I proposed. God, it felt real back then. That's what hurt the most. Knowing it wasn't always fake. But somewhere along the way, we both lost track of who we were. Some nights, I'd make dinner and still catch myself setting out 2 plates. Some mornings, I'd wake from dreams of her and spend hours shaking off the sadness I didn't know how to name. But I stayed quiet. No contact. I never reached out. And neither did she. Until 1 year later. First week of October. Leaves were burning red and gold, the air sharp with that early bite of winter. I was outside splitting wood when I heard tires crunch on the gravel road. I wasn't expecting anyone. Nobody ever came out this far. I stepped around the corner of the cabin, still holding the axe, and that's when I saw her. Ashley. She was standing next to a rental car, bundled up in a coat, hair whipped around by the wind, her eyes red like she hadn't slept in days. She looked smaller somehow. Worn down. Like life had carved something out of her that makeup couldn't cover. Her hands were shaking, one clutching her phone, the other wrapped around her car keys like she wasn't sure which one could save her. We just stood there. No words. No tears. Just silence. I didn't move. I didn't say anything. I just stared, waiting to see if the woman in front of me was the same one who once shattered me. And then, voice trembling, barely louder than the wind, she said, "Jake. I ruined everything. Please. Please let me explain." But I didn't respond. Not yet. Because I needed to know who I was looking at. The woman who broke me? Or someone who finally saw the damage she caused? I didn't invite her inside right away. I stood there with the axe still in my hand. Not because I felt threatened, but because I needed something to hold on to. My heart was racing, but it wasn't rage. It wasn't even sadness. It was disbelief. After 12 months of silence, 100 imagined versions of her life without me, she was here. In front of me. She asked if she could come in. Her voice was hoarse, like it hadn't been used in weeks. I gave her a single nod and led her into the cabin, the same place she once joked was a hermit hole when she found out where I'd gone. I poured 2 mugs of tea. She didn't touch hers. Just sat there, stiff on the edge of the chair, like she was waiting to be kicked out. I remember looking at her, all worn down and haunted, and finally saying, "Start with the truth. No filters. No nice versions. Just tell me what I never got to hear." And that's when she broke. She told me there had been someone else. Which, yeah, I already knew. Her behavior gave her away long before her words ever did. But what I didn't see coming was who it was. It wasn't some coworker. Wasn't a stranger. It was someone I trusted more than anyone. Matt. My best friend. The guy who stood beside me at our wedding. The guy who once crashed on our couch for weeks when his girlfriend threw him out. She looked down when she said his name, like she couldn't even stand to say it out loud. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. "I was lonely. You were distant. Always working. Always tired. And he was just there." I stared at her. "Lonely?" She flushed. "I'm not blaming you, Jake. I'm just saying, it wasn't love. Not with him. It was selfish. And I knew it." I asked her what Matt said when I disappeared. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "He said you probably found out and couldn't handle it. That you were punishing us. That you always did have a temper." I actually laughed at that. A dry, cold laugh. I'd never laid a hand on anyone in my life. I didn't yell during fights. My silence was my weapon, and I guess to them that silence became a canvas they could paint their own version of me on. She added quickly, like it mattered, "It didn't last. Me and him. It fell apart after a month. He was cheating on me, too. Almost immediately. And I'll be honest, I wanted to feel satisfied hearing that. I wanted that spark of karma to warm me up. But I didn't feel it. All I felt was tired." She wiped her face and said, "I looked everywhere for you. Called your family. Your friends. Nobody knew anything. It was like you vanished." I nodded. "I did. That was the point." "But why?" she asked. "Why not scream at me? Why not demand answers?" I took a deep breath. Because if I stayed, I knew I'd end up listening to a bunch of half-truths and tears and apologies I didn't believe in. I left before I could forget what it felt like to finally see you clearly. She didn't argue. Just sat there and took it. Then, in the smallest voice, she said, "You were right to leave. But I was wrong to let you." I didn't answer right away. Because what she didn't know was that in all the time I'd been gone, I'd been rebuilding. Not a relationship, but myself. And I wasn't sure if she deserved to touch the peace I'd fought so hard to earn. That night, she stayed in the guest room. Not because I invited her to, but because the sky was already darkening, and a storm was rolling in fast. And even after everything, I wasn't going to send her out into freezing rain. I wasn't cruel. But I didn't offer comfort either. After our conversation, we didn't speak again. Not that night. I made a fire and she sat close, silent, barely blinking. I stayed outside for most of the evening, the cold rain soaking through my sweatshirt while I stared at the lake, listening to the wind and trying to remember who I was before her, and who I became after she was gone. Because if I was going to let her back into my life, even for a second, I had to be sure it wouldn't undo everything I'd rebuilt out here with my own 2 hands. Next morning, she was already up. I found her in the kitchen, wiping down clean dishes like she was trying to stay busy, like her hands needed something to do before her mind pulled her back under. She didn't look at me. Just said, real soft, "I used to dream about this place. Every month. Sometimes every week. I imagined finding it. But I thought you'd be angry if I came." I poured myself coffee and said, flat, "I'm not angry." That made her look at me for the first time. "You're not?" "No. Because here's the truth, anger is still a connection. It means you still care enough to feel something. But I stopped being angry a long time ago." She sat down slowly, like the weight of that hit her in the chest. We sat in silence for a bit, just the sound of rain against the windows and the slow ticking of the clock on the wall. And then she finally asked, "Do you want to know what happened after you left?" I shrugged. "If you need to tell it." So she did. She said when I first left, she didn't even panic. Not right away. Thought maybe I'd gone for a drive, or just needed space. But as the hours passed and the silence held, she started to get scared, not for me, but for herself. She searched the apartment. Found the wedding ring I'd left on the nightstand. And in that moment, she realized I wasn't coming back. But it wasn't grief she felt first. It was fear. Because the version of the story where I forgave her, that door slammed shut. Matt stuck around for a little while. But it wasn't love. Not even close. It was chaos. It was noise. A distraction. She told me he started pulling away almost immediately. Seeing someone else. Someone younger. Turns out, he was cheating on her too. I wanted to feel some kind of justice in that. Really, I did. But all I felt was more of the same, tired. She said her 31st birthday came and went while she sat alone, staring at our wedding photo. Wearing a dress she'd bought to impress Matt. Crying on the floor of her bedroom. Alone. Her friends, the ones who once pushed her to follow her heart, they bailed when things got messy. The empowerment quotes stopped. Even her sister stopped answering texts after Ashley broke down crying in the middle of a family dinner. That's when she realized something, she said, eyes fixed on a crack in the cabin floor. I gave up the one man who stood by me, for noise. I nodded. Not out of sympathy. Just acknowledgement. Because yeah, that's the thing about temporary, it always fades. Always disappears. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. Do you hate me? I looked her in the eyes. No. I don't hate you. But I also don't feel what you want me to feel. She blinked. Like she was bracing herself. What do you mean? Longing. Nostalgia. That aching hope that people have when they try to rekindle something that's already burned to ash. I felt that once. But I buried it out here, alone, with every sunrise I watched without you. With every dinner I cooked for one and didn't mind. With every breath I took that didn't feel heavy anymore. Her lips trembled. So, this is it? I looked out the window. The rain was letting up. Trees dripping, swaying just a little in the breeze. I said, I don't know. That's not just up to me. That's up to both of us. But what I hadn't said out loud yet, the part one didn't even know was true until that moment, was that yes, a piece of me still cared. Not about our marriage. That was long gone. But about her. About the person sitting across from me, wrecked and raw. Because no matter what happened, I didn't want her destroyed. I didn't want her punished. I wanted peace. For both of us. And I was starting to realize, maybe that peace didn't mean shutting the door in her face. But it also didn't mean swinging it wide open either. She didn't cry. Didn't argue. Just nodded, slowly, like she knew I meant it. Then she said, "Can I stay one more night?" Not in the house. In the car. Outside. I'm not ready to go back yet. Not until I can face what I've done. I looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time, I didn't see my wife. I didn't see betrayal. I didn't even see regret. I saw someone whose world had collapsed, and who finally understood she had to rebuild it herself. So I nodded. "One more night," I said. "But after that, you go. Not because I'm cold. But because I'm not your recovery plan. You want peace? You earn it. Same way I did. With truth. With silence. And a whole lot of time." That final night, she stayed in the guest room again. We didn't talk. I didn't ask how she was sleeping. She didn't ask if I was okay. I built a fire and sat in front of it while she kept to herself behind a closed door. It was quiet, almost peaceful. Like we both understood the weight of what wasn't being said. She was still here, but I was already letting go. The next morning, I woke early. Walked out to the kitchen, expecting awkward small talk or maybe a last attempt at connection. But she was gone. No knock. No goodbye. Just the lingering scent of her perfume in the hallway and a silence that felt different this time. Then I saw it, an envelope tucked just under the front door. It had my name on it. Just Jake. Nothing else. I stood there staring at it for a long time. Not because I was scared of what it said, but because I wasn't sure if I was ready to feel anything again. I'd already made peace with her leaving once. Now she was doing it again, but this time with words. Eventually, I sat down and opened it. The handwriting was messy. A few sentences scratched out, a few others rewritten. It wasn't polished. It wasn't elegant. But that's what made it real. She wrote that she knew she didn't deserve my time, not even this space I'd given her. That for a long time, she thought closure was something people owed each other. But now she understood it had to be built alone. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She said she wouldn't even accept it if I offered. But what she wanted was for me to know this. The silence I left behind, it echoed louder than any fight we could have had. And now she understood why I didn't yell. Why I didn't demand explanations. Because anything I might have said would have been buried under her excuses. And in the end, she said, what I gave her wasn't punishment. It was a gift. A chance to face herself without a shield. I sat there for a while after reading it. I didn't feel some emotional breakthrough. I didn't cry. I didn't feel triumph or pity. What I felt was something simpler, stillness. Like someone had finally closed the last chapter of a long, heavy book I didn't know I'd still been carrying. That day, I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the sun rise over the lake. It looked different that morning. Brighter somehow. Not because she came and went. But because I stayed. I stayed true to myself. I didn't chase her when she left. I didn't let her back in just because she finally realized what she'd lost. And I didn't cling to the fantasy of fixing something that had already run its course. She was gone. Again. But this time, I wasn't broken. In fact, I felt whole in a way I never had when we were together. That letter didn't feel like an apology wrapped in romance. It felt like a eulogy, for the version of her I once loved, and the version of me who spent too long trying to be enough for someone who never saw him. 3 months passed after that. Life slowly found its rhythm again. I rebuilt the porch. Planted a greenhouse out back. Started learning how to bake sourdough, something I never had the time or patience for before. It was simple. But it was mine. Then one morning while I was in town picking up lumber, someone called my name. I turned and saw someone I hadn't thought about in over a year. Ryan. An old friend. One of the few people who never picked sides. He looked surprised, but not in a bad way. Said I looked different, peaceful. Like someone who had made peace with something most people never get over. We ended up grabbing coffee at the diner. It was strange being around someone from the past, but it didn't hurt. I wasn't the same man I used to be. He didn't ask where I'd gone. Didn't ask what happened. He just let me exist without trying to fix anything. But then, halfway through his coffee, he said something that caught me off guard. You know, Ashley changed after you left. Not just her lifestyle. Everything. She started volunteering. Quit drinking. Cut off Matt completely. I didn't say anything at first. Just listened. He kept going. I saw her at the store a few weeks ago. She looked older. Sadder. But more grounded. And she told me something strange. She said she still talks to you. That made me look up. Talks to me? Yeah. Every morning. She writes letters. Doesn't send them. Just keeps them in a box by her window. Says it's the only way she can make sense of her thoughts now. She talks to you like you're still across the table from her. Like you're still listening. I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't feel pity. Or pride. Or some kind of strange victory. What I felt was distance. Like hearing someone describe a dream they once had. A dream that meant the world to them, even though they woke up a long time ago. Ashley used to be everything to me. Now she was just a story someone else was telling. Ryan asked me if I ever thought about going back. I shook my head. Back to what? To a memory that doesn't hold up anymore? He nodded. Yeah. I figured. That conversation stayed with me for days, not because of what she was doing, but because it reminded me of something important. Even if someone changes, even if they grow, it doesn't mean they're supposed to come back into your life. Sometimes growth isn't about reunion. Sometimes it's just about moving forward. It was a Tuesday when the last letter came. I wasn't expecting anything. Out here, the mailbox is usually nothing but dust and spiderwebs. Bills don't follow you when you vanish. Neither do most people. But that morning, as I walked down the gravel path to check it like I always did, there it was. One envelope. Plain white. No return address. Just my name. Jake. The handwriting was unmistakable. That slight tilt in the letters, the loops in the J and K, it was hers. Ashley. I didn't open it right away. I stood there in the driveway for a while, sun on my shoulders, wind brushing past like it was nudging me forward. And when I finally sat down on the porch steps and broke the seal, I could tell, this one was different. It wasn't laced with guilt. Wasn't taped together with apologies. It felt final. The paper smelled faintly like rosemary. She used to grow it on our windowsill back in the early days. The ink was smudged in places, like she'd paused again and again before finding the right words. She wrote, Jake. I promised myself I wouldn't send any of the letters. But this one felt like it needed to be heard. I don't expect anything from you. Not forgiveness. Not a reply. I just want you to know, I found peace. A kind I never thought I'd reach. I spent months rewriting the past in my head. Trying to become the woman I should have been back when you needed me most. But one day I realized, you didn't need me to become someone new for you. You needed me to become better for myself. And I did. I'm not broken anymore. I'm not lost. I'm living in a quiet town by the coast now. I teach art classes to kids. They remind me how to create without fear. I take long walks by the ocean. I adopted an old dog named Buster. I laugh again. For real this time. The kind of laugh I used to have when we first met. And sometimes when I sit down with a cup of tea, I think of you, not with pain, not with guilt, just gratitude. For walking away. For not yelling. For letting silence say what anger never could. You taught me something I'll carry for the rest of my life. When you truly love someone, sometimes the kindest thing you can do is leave. I hope you're well. I hope you're still watching those sunsets. I hope you found someone who truly sees you, the way I never did. With peace. Ashley. I folded the letter and slid it into the drawer next to my bed. The one where I keep things that shaped me. My dad's old pocket knife. A picture of my dog as a puppy. The key to our first apartment. I didn't cry. I didn't feel wrecked. I just felt still. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm passes and the world smells fresh again. That was over 6 months ago. Since then, I finished rebuilding the cabin. I planted a small greenhouse out back. I've made real friends in town, people who only know me as Jake from the lake, not Jake the husband who vanished. I started teaching woodworking at the local rec center. Something small. But it means something. There's a woman named Claire who brings extra tools to class, because I always forget mine, and we laugh about it. A lot. It's easy. No pressure. No past to outrun. Just the present. Sometimes I catch myself watching the light over the lake in the evening, golden and soft, and I smile. Not because everything worked out how I imagined, but because it didn't. It worked out how it needed to. I used to think closure came from confrontation. But now I know, it comes from choosing yourself. Quietly. Every day. Until one day, you wake up, look around, and realize, you're free. And I am. Finally.